figure out a way to burn coal without putting carbon dioxide in the air, there's only three ways to do it. You have to bury it, or you have to use probably nanotechnology to change the chemical composition of carbon dioxide, or you have to take it right from the burning and plow it into plants, as they're trying to do at Arizona State University. They're putting it into algae, putting the algae on steroids and releasing clean oxygen. If you do that, then you can continue to mine coal and you won't hurt the world. If you're doing it, you're not trying to stop the world, you're trying to live with confidence in the face of change. If you're working on more efficient engines and alternative fuels, you're doing it. If you came here to study the program of Homeland Security, you're doing it. How do we maintain freedom of movement and still recognize that our biggest security threats are not from other countries, but from people who can just move around and do harm? You're helping to keep the world going. If you're working in the biological sciences, you're doing it. Most of the jobs we can create in this country in the next 5 to 10 years will probably come from changing the way we produce some energy. Most of the jobs beyond that, 10 years beyond, I believe will be generated out of advances in biological sciences being driven primarily by the sequencing of the human genome. And there's lots to do. But if I could just put it in a sentence, I think this is the best I can do. If you attempt to stop the world theory, and you say you want not only your life, but the lives of your parents and your friends and our country and increasingly people throughout the world to be lived with confidence in the face of change, then we all have to be in the future business. And that's one little catchphrase that will encompass nearly everything. You think about everything America has done. The future business of the economy means we've got to create jobs. We have to bring manufacturing back to America. We have to figure out how to get the banks to loan money again. There's $1.5 trillion in America's banks. They can make $10 trillion in loans tomorrow, and all this economic will be over in a nanosecond. If you're talking about health care, we have to figure out how to stop spending $1 trillion a year more than we could spend if we had any other country's healthcare system, for a system that doesn't make us more well than our competitors are. The bill that passed, I think, was a good first step, but only the beginning. If you're talking about education, you have to figure out how to bring the benefits of education to people who don't come into colleges and universities. I think the changes in the student loan programs that cut the interest rate costs and let people pay back as a percentage of their income, their college loans, is a big advance. Because now you can be a teacher, you can be a police officer, you can be a nurse, you can go in to teach for America, you can go into AmeriCorps, the Peace Corps, and you won't go broke because you know that your obligation will never exceed a certain percentage of your income. But we can't keep increasing the cost of higher education 75% of the decade after inflation and expect to empower more and more people to do this. If you're talking about our finances, we have to find a way to regulate investments so that America is still an attractive place for people to invest their money, but we don't let these institutions get leverage at 34 or 35 to 1 and let people just gamble with money with no stake in the end. That's what happened in the home loan. People who issued the mortgages got rid of it and then had no stake in whether the people could stay in their homes. If you're talking about the wider world, the poor countries have a totally different problem. We have to reform our institutions. They have to build it. But if you will just think about it, in your work, in your citizenship, and in what I hope will be your service, everything we do should be about putting ourselves in the future business and about turning our good intentions into real changes. There's room here for a conservative versus liberal debate, or Republican versus Democrat debate, any debate you want. But we all have to understand that we are in this future together. I leave you with this thought. To me, the most important finding that came out of the sequencing of the human genome is that we are all 99.9% the same. And then an independent group had a big breakthrough, and they said, a couple of years after this, said, oh, no, we're not. We're only 99.5% the same. Now, to be fair, as every biologist in the audience knows, 0.4% is a very significant number since there are 3 billion elements in the human genome. But from a psychological and social point of view, it doesn't amount to millimeters. If you think about it, you look around this audience, every difference you can see, gender, skin color, hair color, eye color, size, shape, the whole shebang, every non-related difference you can see in each other is rooted in somewhere between 1/10 of 1% and 1/2 of 1% of your genetic makeup. Does that mean that identity is not important? No. You should still be proud of being from West Virginia. You can still root for your team. You should be proud of your racial and ethnic heritage. But it means that in an interdependent world where you can't stop the world, you can't get off, and you can't escape each other, the only way to celebrate what is unique about your life is to recognize that what we have in common matters more. If the world can come to what happened to that poor, disturbed Pakistani American who went back to Waziristan, that area that has never been under the control of the Pakistani government, and learned how to make a car bomb, and came back here and tried to set it off after he had gotten 2 degrees in the United States, married a woman who got a degree in the United States, had an opportunity to become a homeowner, and then his life got off track. What made him think that somehow he could redeem the disappointments of his life by setting off a car bomb in Times Square? He was convinced that our differences were more important than our common humanity. Important enough to die for and to do it. Let me tell you something, folks. One thing I've learned now, some 42 years after my own college graduation, life passes quickly enough as it is. There's enough adversity in it as it is. It will be over before you know it. You need to make the most of it, have a good time doing it, but be rooted in an understanding of the time in which you live. You are so lucky. I'd give anything at your age and run it all through again in this era. It's a great time, but you got to make the most of it. You got to put America in the future business. You have to take some time to serve as well as to do the rest of your life. And you have to do it with the absolute conviction that you are free to appreciate what is truly unique and wonderful about your own life. Because you live in a country in which our common humanity matters more. And you have to take that idea and spread it to everyone who doesn't believe it and across the world. If you do, it's going to be great. Do not be pessimistic. People have been betting against the United States since the American Revolution. You ought to go back and read all the people who said poor George Washington was nothing more than a mediocre surveyor who never really won a battle and didn't even have a good set of false teeth. The people who said Abraham Lincoln was a buffoon and we'd be better off if something happened to him. People have always bet against this country. We have always come back because we wound up doing the right thing. In this time, for you, the right thing is to get in the future business and stay there. To tell people why we can't stop the world and help them to live with confidence. and to recognize that as glorious as our diversity is, our common humanity matters most of all. God bless you and good luck.